Well, welcome to Drupal as a Hub, syndicating and distributing content across complex organizations. My name is David Myers. The three of us are from the University of San Francisco. We were hoping to just get a sense of where everyone's from. Do you mind just giving us a brief detail about where you're coming from?
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh?
Pretty local.
Yeah. And are you with a nonprofit or a university? Or?
Currently unemployed.
Unemployed, okay.
I'm Rochelle. I live in Orange County and I work for Freddie Mac.
Oh, okay. Great.
What developer at UC Davis?
University of Davis.
At University of San Francisco.
Perfect. So to meet the team, we are part of Web and Digital Communications at the University of San Francisco, which is part of the Office of Marketing Communications. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to play the part of historian. So I'm going to give a little background about how we got here. Rob Bain is going to play the part of the architect and talk about the content flow, and then Michael Juarez will be the technician and talk about all the technical implementation that we did. Any questions before we start? All right. So to really understand everything, we want to bring you back quite a ways back about 10 years. So in 2015, the university had one website. It was a website essentially for all audiences. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to split the website up into two different audience-based websites. So what we did was we created a marketing website for prospective students, alumni, donors, parents, families. And then we created a second website, which is MyUSF, and it's an internally focused website, but it's a public website, and that's for current students, faculty, and staff. So the big question that we had when separating these two sites was, how are we going to handle events and the distribution of those? So we, as a university, we're using a system called EMS to book any sort of meeting rooms or anything like that. The system itself was pretty cumbersome and limited in the way that you could edit those events. So we made the decision to actually bring everything into Drupal. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to use the marketing website as our hub for events. So what we did was we essentially built an event system on our marketing website to populate any sort of upcoming events that were happening. So what problems did we encounter? So the big thing that we noticed was there was a lot of system bloat because we were building this whole event system in with our regular website. For the event editors weren't necessarily savvy when it came to Drupal. So there was a steep learning curve for event editors to actually learn Drupal and be able to use the system. It was also a little bit confusing as far as event distribution because everything was on the marketing website. Event editors were confused, if I want it on this website, do I need to go here to edit? It just caused for a bit of confusion. And then user management and access was also a little bit cumbersome in the sense that we had to essentially create a permissioning system for the events and also create a permissioning system for regular website editors. So in 2022, we decided to redesign our websites again. This time what we decided to do was actually do a centralized approach through marketing communications. So essentially, our team was responsible for making all of the website edits for the marketing website. And then for MyUSF, it was a distributed model. And at that point, we had talked about what was the best approach for us to work with events. So we decided to actually create a standalone Drupal instance that we could use specifically for events. As we were building that system, what were some of the improvements that we considered? We really wanted to refine the editing experience because we saw the pain points that users experienced when they were trying to edit events. We tried to do a form-like behavior to make it a little bit easier for them to really just go and fill out a form that would then populate their events. We also provided more control over how the events are distributed. So in that form, they had the ability to select where they wanted it to go, what platform, and we also improved user management just because it was a standalone instance that we could dedicate for events. And then the other thing was training. That was important to us. So we actually worked with another group on campus. We built a training around the event system that required, users were required to go through the training. They were also required to take a web accessibility course and pass that before we gave them access. And that's essentially how we got to where we're at. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Rob Bain, and he's going to talk about some of the content flow.
Thank you, David. So we kind of had a problem with kind of events being created all over the place, was scattered all over. We had editors kind of all over the place who were not really part of our organization. They had different needs, different skill sets. And we just kind of had this cognitive dissonance with like all these sources of content going to all these different destinations. So we kind of wanted to be able to kind of rationalize the system. So on the distribution side, we had sources coming from the EMS system that David mentioned, where people kind of actually create events, mostly the event details like location, time, date, that kind of thing. We had athletics events coming from a separate website controlled by our athletics department, sporting events mostly, as you would imagine. Then we had academic calendar events. We had just HTML, static HTML tables with our academic calendar, deadlines and stuff on there. We wanted to break that out of static HTML and make them more dynamic so they would appear in different lists and different destination sites where people could kind of browse, sort, and search. Then we had a Slate CRM system, which was mainly used by our admissions department. We have admissions counselors who go out on do information sessions and recruiting events. So we had events coming from that system as well. And all these different sources are getting matched up with different destinations, like the websites that David mentioned are marketing, our main marketing front-facing website that we use to recruit students with, and we have the internal website we call MyUSF. And we also have digital signage, stuff like this kind of scattered around across all of our different campuses, and then a mobile app, and we also have an email marketing system that we use to send emails out throughout the USF community and beyond. And the system that we had allows for like importing an RSS feed for like say like a newsletter, or you want to pull like Department of Sociology events and get those loaded up automatically. So we wanted to be able to push stuff into that system as well. And so, like as I said, we wanted to bring it all together. We wanted to be able to enhance our editing capabilities, which Drupal was great for. We're able to kind of control, lock down, WYSIWYG features, styling. And we also wanted to be able to tag content so we can categorize it and then make it easier to find on these different source sites. And then it's just kind of a consolidation. We had this kind of many-to-many system, and we wanted to make it a little easier, kind of lower the overhead, the cognitive overhead. So now we have like a many-to-one system, everything kind of going into this new Drupal events website, and then a one-to-many relationship where everything comes out of that site to these different sources that we looked at. And I'm going to pass it over to Michael Juarez, who's going to talk about the kind of implementation of all this.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm also one of the developers at University of San Francisco along with Rob, and just kind of reinforcing the problem, right? We have all this content from all kinds of different places. A university is a big, complex organization. We need to take that content and we need to redistribute it out in meaningful ways so that people can control it and they can sort of publish it and then make it look good. So Drupal is really good at doing this. Any of you who've worked in Drupal technically will know that, because there's some out-of-the-box things that come in Drupal that you could totally use for this. So this slide really illustrates one of two paths you can take. You can either choose, of course you can design your own system, you can kind of write your own code, but there are feeds or migrate. Now, working in Drupal, you know the difference between feeds and migrate. Two different modules, two different kind of core modules that can be used for this exact purpose. So the things that we chose, we've worked with both of them in the past, but currently we choose feeds as the module of choice. Now, what feeds does is it brings in content from all kinds of different places into your Drupal site, right? So using APIs, you've got JSON feeds, maybe you've got RSS feeds, XML feeds, you've got all kinds of feeds that all kinds of systems in your ecosystem kind of produces and distributes. And so feeds can take all that information and it can consume it and put it into Drupal for you. It's really good at doing that to some degree. It does take out, it consumes all sorts of different formats, RSS, XML, JSON, and so on. It has another module that we can use on top of that, which is called tamper, which is going to be very important, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. One of the downsides of feeds, of course, if you have very large data sets, say you have, for us, we have thousands of events on campus. So we're looking at feeds that could be multiple pages with many hundreds, maybe even thousands of nodes that need to be consumed at one time. This causes this causes the feeds module to kind of, sometimes it often freezes up, it gets locked, and it may stay locked for a little while, sometimes for days, sometimes for hours. And so this is of course a problem. Because it's a bottleneck. It prevents new updates from coming in and new events from coming in. So when you have those very large data sets, this is the feeds module is definitely at a disadvantage for that. One of the ways that you can sort of deal with that problem is depending on how you kind of build your systems, we run on Pantheon, and so we use CircleCI and GitHub. We can create a GitHub Actions cron job, which can do all kinds of things like unlock. It can also do re-imports and all these other things because of Terminus Drush that you can use in Pantheon. So migrate, we use migrate for a while as well. Migrate is really great for larger data sets, but the downside is you really have a drain on developer resources. You know, you have to kind of create these extensive YAML files for each feed, and you know that takes time. If you have a kind of a complicated upstream process like we do, you know it could take. And if you're going to tie it into, say if you're doing development sprints and you tie it into a development sprint, that could take time to actually make that sort of thing happen. So you know. If you really want to kind of make it more, democratize it a little bit, so more individuals within your organization can sort of manage and sort of create these things, then migrate is not necessarily your best choice. But it is really good for larger data sets as well. And then, of course, there's tamper. Tamper is going to be one of the most important modules that you will need if you're going to try to do this kind of strategy. And that is because, as you know, data coming from outside sources are not always the best, right? They're not always the cleanest. There's a lot of problems that could actually cause your systems to fail. Date timestamps are always a challenge for anybody. And so what tamper does is allows you to kind of take content that comes in from a feed and manipulate it on a string level so that it's something that can be easily consumed by your system. And this is going to be really important to you as you go ahead with this kind of a strategy, should you choose it. This slide just describes how you can kind of layer up tamper filters to kind of work together to kind of manipulate the data that comes in. So, you know, the question is, of course, like, when you're going to consume data from different resources, well, excuse me, from different sources within a university system, for us as a university, with any complex array of data sources, you're going to need to design your content types in a certain way. Those content types have to be ready to take the data that's coming in. And there's some very important things you need to be aware of, one of which is make sure you always have a unique ID for each bit of content that's going to be coming in. Because what Feeds does, or any sort of content strategy like this, is, when there's a change somewhere, you want to make sure the change is reflected in your system, whatever you're doing. And the ID, the unique ID, is what determines what needs to be updated. So unique IDs are critically important for this sort of thing, and we learned very quickly that this is true. Well, sometimes we'll find that data becomes replicated very quickly if that sort of a strategy is not kind of thought out in the beginning. The other thing that you want to try to do is, when content comes to our central system, we want to slice and dice it, because when it comes in, it's going to go out again, right? And when it goes out, it's going to different systems. It may be going to a website, it may be going to a mobile app, it may be going to digital signage, or any other kind of communication medium. So we need to really slice and dice that data. And that's where taxonomy comes important, right? Taxonomy, when this data comes in, you can determine where it needs to go once it goes out again. So those are two very critical sorts of bits of information that you'll need to make sure you include. So for, this kind of slide just kind of repeats what I said before. You're going to try to figure out where your content needs to go. You're going to tag it. I gave an example, like if you have a law school, you want to make sure it goes to your law website or your law pages or any place where that's relevant, and not to other places that they don't care about that. In the pro tip here, I said make sure that you consider your vocabularies with permissions, because taxonomy vocabularies can become very unwieldy very quickly. We ran into the problem where we see a lot of repetition if we're not really careful about controlling taxonomy usage and access. We see a lot of repetition coming in, so you may end up having like one taxonomy term of the same name multiple times with lots of different content bits attached to that taxonomy term. And so then you end up with like, well, now we have to move things back to where they really belong. And that's not a fun task for anybody. And then so what I've talked about so far is consuming. So remember, we're at this centralized system. We're taking content in from all kinds of different places. Particularly for us, it's event systems, external event systems. Now we need to make it so that it goes back out again, right? And that is where your views, data export or JSON API views comes into play, where you're taking that content and then you're sending it out again in the form of JSON, XML file, XML format, RSS, anything else that those other services consume. Our mobile app consumes JSON, for example. Digital signage may consume XML. Other websites consume JSON as well. So, this is where we start to redistribute the content. And Views comes with this built in. You can use your JSON REST API. If you're protecting your content, if you need it to be so that anyone can't get access to it, or it's sensitive, then you can authentication for controls also available in Drupal. We don't do that because we don't really need to. We're just talking about events and news, which everybody knows about anyway, so there's really no need for us to sort of have that level of security. So that's really kind of what we did. To recap, we came in with this problem. We have content that comes from all kinds of places, and this is true for any complex organization. It comes from all kinds of different places, and everybody in the organization wants their content to be available to the world, right? They want everyone to see it and to be able to get access to it. But their systems don't really provide that for them very well. Our first case was EMS, which is their event management system. It didn't do that very well, or it didn't do it in a way that was satisfactory to us. So we needed to find a way to take that content that came in from EMS and redistribute it out to various places. That was our problem. And of course, our journey was, we started out thinking, how are we going to do this? We used our marketing site as the first point, as the first way of redistributing this content, the first hub, you might want to call it. And then we ran into certain problems with that. There's access control, there's, too many people getting into it, there's all that problem. Eventually we came to the point where we said, we really need something standalone that can handle this. And now that we have that, we can move forward again. Now we see a bunch of new content coming from WordPress sites, right? A bunch of blog posts that people want to have on their webpage or on their website. We see social media. We see all kinds of things coming down that we need to be able to handle. And so this strategy really kind of allows us to do that by creating this sort of intermediary step. So that's it for us. If there's any questions, feel free to ask.
Can you talk a bit more about taxonomy? So when you import, do you import taxonomy terms from the different sources as well?
Yes. So, some sources don't really have taxonomies. So take, for example, event management. They don't really necessarily have a taxonomy on their end. But what happens is when it comes to our central repository, our hub, those event managers go into that and they have a way of editing it. So then they add taxonomy on that end to say, yes, I want this to show up under, say, classes say, meetups or something for someone outside the university. So then that would go into our public marketing site. On the other hand, so that's what happens with there. What we can do is we can sort of, and this is where Tamper comes in really well. We could say, well, we want every type of event that comes from here to have a certain taxonomy as it comes in. And so with Tamper, we can actually assign taxonomies in that way if we need to. But that's very general to a whole classification of content. It's not necessarily something you can do one at a time.
Right. So the idea is that, for example, somebody created an article on the WordPress site, you import the article, not taking the taxonomy from that site, but editor need to log into your platform and assign new taxonomies according to your structure.
They can, yeah. We actually start for WordPress, for example. You do have keywords in your feed, so we actually just start to consume those keywords as taxonomy terms.
Yeah, I'm just very curious about the conflicts of taxonomy terms.
Yeah.
Because when you run the import, you can say that article has the taxonomy term Halloween, and then there's another source with Halloween 2025, and there's another one with Halloween with different capitals. How do you consolidate that?
Yeah, so I think what we would do, for example, if we have a blog coming in from a particular school, say School of Education has their blog, what we would do is we would just make sure that the only taxonomy we would probably assign to that is School of Education as the vocabulary, and then each term itself would be whatever the keyword array is in their feed or whatever they set up on their end. So if, for example, one of those keywords were say when we're importing them, we're allowing those terms to be created, we would do that. But they shouldn't, if they collide, it's kind of on them because the parent vocabulary would be School of Education. So if they get Halloween 2025, Halloween 2024, it would still be a term that they use, but it wouldn't necessarily collide with other terms because they should be aware of what they're doing, right? They should be aware of how they're keywording their articles.
So when you do the import, you put them under the hierarchy of that particular source, essentially. Right. So there will be no such thing like, hey, can I get all the events related to Halloween?
Yes.
There will be no such thing because this Halloween terms can be.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That becomes a real problem. We learned. So that would be what we're talking about is a very narrow case. But for the most part, what we do is we control taxonomy terms because like you said, if we allow the system to create taxonomy terms based on data that's set up in this external source, you get all kinds of problems, right? All kinds of situations. You get 3 times Halloween 2025, right? School of Education does it, School of Law does it, they both have Halloween 2025. Now we have 2 Halloween 2025 terms. And suddenly we have different bits of content attached to the same thing. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's really important like I said, one of the key ideas, one of the things that we struggle with a lot is taxonomy, because it's powerful, it's great, it allows us to do all of this stuff. But on the other hand, it's too powerful, and it's too great, and it causes a lot of problems that go along with it. So you really have to look at your strategy. If you've got a really complex organization, you may have to just control it yourself. If there's a few units who are using it, and you can kind of agree on something, then maybe that'll work. You really have to try it out.
And you have some processes internally, someone goes and reviews those
Yeah.
and make sure that there are less duplicates.
Yeah, so like I said, we started controlling our taxonomies more and more to make sure that the lists are clean and that no new taxonomies are created automatically. Because Drupal has the ability to let you do that, and just making sure that everything kind of stays in order. So yeah, we do have to oversee that. Unfortunately, I wish we could. We should actually go to the AI one, and maybe we could figure out a way to have AI deal with it.
But those lists can be like thousands.
Yeah.
Terms, right?
Yes. They're very big. They can be very big if you don't watch over them. For sure. Do you guys want to add to that?
We have student workers. They need stuff to do, so.
There you go.
I recorded that.
That's a great one. And another question for the import. You import all sources, all articles, every single time, right?
So we do. We update the articles. So we're not like clearing them out and re-importing them. We're importing all the articles that go to a certain feed. So I think for like WordPress, for example, it's like 20 maybe, I think, articles at a time. And they come in and we set up feeds modules so that it updates those things if there's a change. And then it does, and then if not, then it leaves it alone. We also set up feeds, recently we set up feeds because it builds up, right? You suddenly have all this content. So you can set up the feeds modules so that it'll remove those items that are not in the feeds. So if you have new, say, old articles are no longer in the feeds, will get deleted next time that's imported. So we started to use that to kind of keep things clean because we figure if it's not in your feed, you don't care about it anymore, right? And if you want it to be there, then put it back, bring it back up. But that's how we handle that. Anything else?
Any other questions?
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.